cybercrime is. There's a whole lot more. I didn't put it up because I didn't understand half of it. So if you guys are looking at half of these and you don't really know what the terms are, don't worry about it. Cybercrime is that. It's nothing more, nothing less than straightforward crime. It's just been committed by a computer or over a computer. Nothing more. You, as a director, partner or trustee, are personally liable for this breach if you've consented in any way, you've connived, or it can be attributable to you, maybe through your negligence, not bringing in systems that you need to bring in. So, Chief Information Officer magazine, well-respected publication, they published their 6 biggest security risks in 2015. First is disgruntled employees. Well, you guys are already saying to me, no, everyone's happy in our firms. But who was passed over for promotion last week? Who maybe missed out on a course? Who was disciplined yesterday? If you look at the risk profile of a disgruntled employee, that's what starts it all off. Yeah? It's small things. It's not being treated fairly in their eyes in that company. That's what starts the process. And there's no such thing as a security risk, just another business risk. What I'm going to show you is from the Ponymon Institute, a well-respected firm that put together information security surveys and so on and so forth. $201 per record loss. Now, I know this is in dollars, but this study was conducted over 4,000 employees in America, the UK, Germany, and Australia. 33% of the customers they also found will go elsewhere if you've had a cyber breach. 30% of your patients will find a different healthcare provider. Now, granted, that's more aligned to America, but it does include private clinics over here. 24% of your customers will switch bank or credit card providers if there's been a breach. So it does affect you. To the point of a 15% increase in the churn rate of your customers if you've had a breach. Financial services, perhaps understandably, are the most susceptible. And of that $201 per compromised record, $134 of that is indirect costs. It's clearing up the mess after the breach. It's not the breach itself. What we have here is, these are the 9 attack vectors for cybercrime that they all talk about. At the very top, denial of services. Yeah? It's trying to take systems down so that you cannot service your clients. That's what denial of service is. Coming further down here, you've got it's called malicious insiders. It's your employees, and they're not all malicious, but it's the people that work in your companies or have access to your company information. The red bars are the ones that don't employ a system, don't bring something in to protect their data. You can see there is a saving by putting systems in place. Yeah? This is what I was talking about when you save by not losing. So, you're all company directors, or along those lines. You all have statutory duties. There are 7. I was going to put them all up, but quite honestly, it made the slides look a right mess, because it's a bright mouthful. So what I've done is I've broken it down. First, it's a bit of a given. You have to make a success of your company. You have to promote that success. You've got to be independent in thought and of mind in all industries, and any firm that processes EU data will be subject to the GDPR. What that GDPR means is it's a 4% of your global annual turnover is the fine for a serious data breach. And it's the business as a whole, not just your group in the UK. If you're an international company, it's 4% of the global turnover. And if as a director, you've done something with its consent, or the breach has happened with your consent in some way, your connivance, or your neglect, you are personally liable. And the thing is, you have to prove that you've done enough. You've all got bags here. You're all off to work after this presentation. If you left your bag in the car park under the table here, is it going to give you a heart attack because of the data that relates to your company that's in it? Computers. You all may have your computers here as well. Are they encrypted? I hope they are, because there's loads of history that says that people leave computers on trains. Mobile phones, we've already covered personal devices. I'll come to that in a little while. We've had a quick run through, and I've talked to you about the nature of cybercrime, how much it's costing your business. I've talked about the risks of things going on, and I've told you how some information can leak. Okay? And without further ado, pass over to Mark.
But what we're going to look at now is probably just a little bit more about the physical aspects of security. Obviously, Gary's touched on the data element and the control of data, the protection of data. But let's just look at a few examples and areas that we can just hopefully just trigger some thoughts in your minds and think, oh, actually, that affects me as a business, or actually, we've got that, or that happened to us. First of all, we want to try and develop a security culture. That means that we want everybody to buy into it. We want the whole company to be part of the security culture. It means we may need to get IT involved to develop security patches and protection. We may need to get HR involved, as Gary mentioned. We may need to get other people involved to communicate all of that out to our staff. We then want to be able to look at areas of risk. What is at risk within our business? Who's at risk? What parts of the business are at risk? Then we look at some common mistakes, and finally we just touch on deterrent, detection and intervention. Now, in the UK, 51% of all UK SMEs have been targeted either by or been the victim of fire or crime in some way. That's more than half of the SMEs in the UK. 75% of those businesses did not have adequate precautions in place to prevent that from happening, to detect it, to do something about it. Now they're interesting statistics. So we've got more than half of SMEs have been targeted by crime. 3/4 of them didn't have adequate precautions in place. This is a scary one. 100% didn't think it would happen to them. Nobody thought that they were going to be the subject of crime or the victim of crime. So how does that equate to the business community? So what we're trying to do really is prevent these things from happening. We're hardening the targets and stopping it from happening in the first place. Now, some of the many areas that we look at, I tried to think of a very, very inert business, something we may consider to be quite, should we say, it's not a high-tech data business. It's a hairdresser's. That's not the one I go to, by the way. Mine's a bit fancier than that. Yeah, they take extra time now. I pay them extra. So we take a hairdresser's. Now, what would happen if an intrusion were to happen in a hairdresser's? First of all, we've got to break in. Now, that's unpleasant. So the hairdressers now has lost cash. They've lost stock, they've lost tip boxes, and typically October, November time, early December is when hairdressers are hit as targets because tip boxes are quite full. The girls have collated all their cash throughout the year, and they're looking to spend their £200 or £300 in tips that they've earned at Christmas time. And very often those tip boxes are left on site. Then there's the reputation of the business. Did you know so-and-so's got broken into? Did they? Have they survived? No, they've gone out of business. You know what it's like on the island. Yeah, bad news travels really fast. We're now going to get the glaziers involved because we need to replace some windows. We need a locksmith because the locks have been tampered with and we don't know who's got keys. We've now lost data and bookings because out of sheer devilment, not only did they take the cash and the tip boxes and a bit of stock, they took the bookings book as well. Didn't mean anything to them, but out of just devilment they did. So now we've got to deal with the insurance company and any subsequent costs involved there. Scenes of crime officers and forensics are now on the place, dousing the place in aluminium dust. We've now lost the whole day's income at least. There's the mess to clear up. There's the staff morale. There's the cancelled appointments, but we can't do that now because someone's stolen the bookings book, the appointments book. So now we've got customers turning up. That is a very, very basic thought and a scenario of a break-in that happens at a very, very low-risk business. Now multiply that by your business, and we get some idea of the potential damage and impact that an intrusion can have. So what are the threats, the concerns, the areas, the risks? It won't happen to me. 100% of those previous victims said it wouldn't happen to them. It's the Isle of Wight, it doesn't happen here? Well, it does. We've seen that quite categorically by the news cuttings. Only happens to big companies. Well, again, it doesn't. We see it happens to lots of all types of companies, large and small. It's never happened before. Well, the farmer said that when his donkey dropped dead. It's never happened before. What am I going to do? We're insured. Well, I'm sure John Heather will be really, really pleased to talk to you about your insurance from NFU, but what's that going to do? Is it actually going to put your business back on track? A lot of people think, well, you know, it's not that serious, so I can patch it over, or I can put a bit of a sticking plaster over a gaping wound. I've got a mate who can do something for me. He knows about computers, he knows about firewalls, he can do this, he can put an alarm in for me. Maplins do security cameras. Yeah, they do. Yeah. Ask Maplins why they don't use their own security cameras to protect their own stores. B&Q do alarm systems. Well, ask them the same question. Why don't you use your product to protect your stores? We've got nothing worth stealing. Everybody has got something worth stealing somewhere. And we'll get one off the internet. Yeah, the whole great, wonderful world of the Internet of Things is going to be there as our saviour. Well, it's not. We need to look at this as individual businesses, as individual organisations, look at the risks involved, see how we're going to be able to negate them. Because these guys are professionals. They know what they're doing. So the people we employ to counteract them, the measures we need to put in place also need to be professional as well.
As businesses, we can't afford it. So what do? Well, everything we do is on a risk-based assessment. It's security because you need it, not because someone like me comes along and says, you need to have it because it looks good. You don't have to protect everything in the business to the same extent. But what are your assets? Well, they're anything that has value to your organisation. And I'm not just talking IT or information, I'm talking people. I'm talking policies, procedures, systems. Your IT, yes, and your data, but it's everything within the business. If you've got one IT guy running your systems and he walks under a bus tomorrow, what resilience have you got? Yeah, he is an asset that you need to protect, or you need to try and put extra measures in to make sure that your business will not fold or cease operating for a period of time if the worst has happened. Then we have to look at the confidentiality and the integrity and the availability related to each of those assets that you've identified. Confidentiality. How protected is that information against unauthorised access? Only the people that should have access to it should get it or should be able to see it. The integrity. How correct and up to date is that data? If it's a database, it needs to be spot on. You need to be able to rely on it. And then the availability. How available is that data or that resource for you to get to it when you need to get to it? Those are the three things we map against every one of your assets. It's called the CIA triad, the confidentiality, availability, and the integrity. And the bit in the middle are the critical data assets that you need to protect. Yeah, they're the ones that matter. So what do? Well, we look at your assets and we map every one of your assets against known threats and known vulnerabilities. And then we look at the impact of the effect that those threats combined with those vulnerability have on your assets. And then lastly, we look at the likelihood of something happening. Those are all the things that come in to work out what the risks are against your assets and what you need to protect. So, but what is a threat? Well, a threat is something that can go wrong, and it's things that can attack. A vulnerability is something that leaves the system open to attack or allow greater impact. And then the impact. Well, it's successful exploitation of the vulnerability by that threat. It's what will that person do who comes in through your open back door inside your building. To affect those three things again: confidentiality, integrity, and availability of your information. And what do we do this time is we give it a monetary value. We give it a figure. Yeah? Now, all threats aren't equal. Yeah? Take an earthquake in southern England that's going to take out your infrastructure. What's the likelihood of that happening? Well, quite frankly, not very likely. How about a flood? We all know from recent history that depending on where you live or where you work, a flood is probably likely in certain circumstances. Or we look at malicious software, malware. These are the attacks that are hitting your businesses every day, and it's happening now, and it's increasing. The idea is to get it as further towards the green as you possibly can. So as a business, we have to work out what your risk tolerance level is, and we base everything on that. And that's why I say it's a business risk approach. It's not security for security's sake. I really love this slide. For those of you who don't know, CEO, Chief Executive Officer, Chief Financial Officer, Chief Operating Officer, and the poor guy who's not sleeping tonight is the Chief Information Security Officer. Now, why is that? Hopefully, with some of the slides I'm going to show you, a lot of you guys will be having a few more sleepless nights. Over half of employees don't understand that. They don't understand the consequences of what will happen to your firm if you lose data. Half have access to intellectual property that they think is above their pay grade. Yeah, this isn't someone else coming along and deciding these things. This is the Podimon Institute research of 4,000 employees. They are saying themselves that they shouldn't have access to it. And across the board as well, it's not just the employees, but it's directors. The value of information isn't correctly understood. So you need to work out what it is, you need to work out where it is, and you need to know who has access to it. Damage is underappreciated by UK employees. Now, this is specific to our country. Only 53% of your employees think that a financial leak is a severe problem to your company. Only 50% of your employees think that an information loss of customer data will have implications or severe implications for your company. 18% will say your information for £1,000, and 29% will sell it for £10,000. Information cheap, isn't it? The point is that our vulnerability is our people. That is the heart of the problem. Yeah? It's not technology. So what do you do about it? Well, I've mentioned to you systems throughout this presentation. What you need to be looking at is an information management system. That's what you need to put in place. It is a management system, but it doesn't replace what you've already got. It fits in with your ordinary management systems in place. It takes a business risk approach. We've already talked about that. And it's there to establish, implement, and operate, maintain, and improve your whole information security. That's what it's about. It's there to help your business, not to restrict it. But there are some barriers to this. I love this slide because it captures what the barriers are. It's the human factor. It's our people. It's your employees. If you treat your staff well and you support them in everything that goes on in their home lives, they will support you in the company. And we use behavioural analysis. Now, you might think this is for the big boys. It's not. It's about working out, you've got your organisational structure. Who else who sits outside of the management structure has influence in your company? Think back to the old days when they used to make union barons a member of the board because it brought them into the fold and they started to toe the party line. It's about working out what is normal and then figuring out what the anomalies are. It's called insider threat profiling, and there is a profile for your employees that do bad things. And then it's evaluating that risk again and acting on that evaluation. Thing is, context is the key. It's why are they doing things? It's not just beating them for the sake of it.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Jonathan Thornton, Managing Director of PC Consultants. What I'd really like to cover in my talk will be looking at some real-world examples of how some of the threats and attacks that we've been discussing this morning have affected companies, including those on the Isle of Wight. So the first one is that of a high net worth individual. Now, this customer worked for a large international investment bank, and they worked at a pretty senior director level within that organisation. And as you can imagine, with them being a bank, IT security was pretty much top-notch. So encrypted laptops, smart cards to log in, pretty much all of the works, firewalls, antivirus, everything. But we were asked to go in and examine his IT security within his home network environment. So what did we find? Well, several things. Firstly, the customer was a real fan of Apple devices. He had lots of Apple pieces of kit in his home. Yeah. iPads, iPhones, MacBook, iMac, all these sort of things, and he used lots of them. He also had 2 young daughters, and what he used to do, when he got a new iPad, he would pass his old iPad down to his kids. And he'd go into his settings and he'd remove his email accounts, he'd delete his photos, clean up his notes. And because they were only 4 and 5, he set a very simple password on there, 1111, one of the ones on the slide earlier. And he let them use it. But what he wasn't doing, he wasn't wiping the iPad. It still had his same main, what we call Apple ID, that was shared with all of his devices. And what we showed him is just by going back into the settings, we could turn back on the things that he'd turned off, and all of a sudden, that data started to reappear on the device. And this was a shared device that lots of people in the home had access to, and it was protected by a very simple password. Okay, next example, subject of spear phishing. Now, phishing is something we describe, when you get an email that might appear to come from eBay or from your bank saying, please click here to verify your details. Well, that phishing email has gone to probably millions of people, and based on percentages, they're hoping someone is going to click the link, and that's how they're going to gain access into your machines. Spear phishing, on the other hand, is something very targeted. So it's targeted against a business or an individual, and a lot more research and time has gone into the attack. So in this example, one of the girls within finance, within this company, received an email from the CEO, what looked like the CEO of the company, asking for the status update on a bank transfer. Everything about the email looked correct. The signature, the sort of thing that they were asking for, the name, it all looked legit. And in IT, if somebody tries to send an email from a domain that's not yours, it would normally fail what we call an SPF record, which is like a protection. It stops me from sending as somebody else. Well, in this example, none of that got red flagged. The email looked legit, the SPF record checked out, and as a result, she'd entered into a dialogue back and forth confirming what account details are it, let me go check. And it was only literally at the very last stage when they checked it, picked up the phone and spoke to him and realised it was completely bogus and it was a totally fraudulent bank account. So what had they done? The fraudsters had gone and registered a domain name that matched the customer's domain name exactly except for a single letter. They changed like an I for an E in the letter. So example here, it wasn't Lakeside Park Hotel, but you can see 2 email addresses up there. I've changed a single letter in there. You can be forgiven, 99%, it looks correct. And at a glance, it looks like Jonathan Thornton at lakesideparkhotel.com. What you got on the slide there, basically a load of gobbledygook. But according to research at an English university, doesn't matter in what order the letters in a word are. The only important thing is that the first and last letter is in the right place. The rest can be a total mess. You can still read it without a problem. This is because we do not read every letter by itself, but the word as a whole. So you can see they were that close to sending a significant amount of money by bank transfer. And it was only at that very large stage that they realised.
Just a few things to cover. Have the spies out over the break. You've all been taking notes on your pads. Don't, whatever you do, lose them, because apparently lots of your company vulnerabilities or issues you've written down on those pads. So I have been around, I have photocopied them all. Just do not lose them on the way home. All of these issues I'm talking about today include the entire business. It's you as directors also. I've done countless investigations where I've investigated the directors because there's been a spat on the boardroom. Yeah? So it includes everyone from the top down. When I talked to her about protective monitoring, the systems that we put in place cover the entire business, including the head of IT. Yeah? Traditionally, they have IT admin access and they can do whatever the hell they like to the logs to hide their activities. If you put the systems in properly, you prevent that from happening. One of the other questions was about trust. How much trust do you give your staff? Well, it's a bit of a balancing act because if you give them too much, they'll take a mile. If you don't give them enough, they become disgruntled. But this is where you have to get HR firmly involved in the whole security process to make sure that you get that balance right. And lastly, I was asked about the issues about bringing in an information security management system into your companies, because you've already got ISO 9001, you've got 14001, you've got this, that and the other. Well, the point is that an information security management system is a framework. It works with all of the other frameworks that you already have in place. It's not supposed to make things more complicated. In fact, it will help streamline things. So there's some of the questions that I was asked over the break. So let's move on. Well, earlier, before the break, I was talking about risk. Jonathan's also touched on it. But how do we get rid of that risk? Well, there's a number of different ways. We look to eliminate it completely. We might do that by bringing in Jonathan to do a data migration. Maybe there's a problem with the servers. So you eliminate that risk. Or you treat it, you reduce it to an acceptable level. That risk or that threat might be the fact that you've got an unmanned reception, as Mark talks about. Your control to reduce your risk is to have cameras in place, or it might be to have swipe card access to the rest of the building. That's how you reduce that risk. But you can tolerate it. This is kind of related to the controls I mentioned earlier. As a business, you can decide, right, okay, well, if we put CCTV in, then that will be an acceptable control on that risk. And then lastly, you can transfer it. Maybe you want to go speak to John Heller from NFU and buy some cyber insurance. That is an acceptable thing to do to offset the risk or the threat to your company. But it all fits in with what we talked about earlier, with your risk matrix. The idea is, if you've got things up there in the red or the orange, by imposing controls or bringing in controls, using mitigation or insurance, you move those risks from the top right further down to the left. And it may be that once you get to here, the moderate, you decide as a company that you're going to tolerate that risk. It has to be signed off by the board, but you can do that. Remember what I said, this isn't security for security's sake. This is about making things work for you as a company. Business continuity. Before we go any further, I know it's not on the slides, or it's not on your timetable. And there is a reason for that, because when I go into my companies, my clients, and I say to them, well, where's your business continuity? They go, yeah, that's fine, we've all got that. What they've got is a couple of pages sitting in a folder that's never been looked at for the last 6 months, and it's sitting in a cupboard at the back of the office. No one quite knows where it is. It certainly hasn't been reviewed in the last year. It's not up to date. And the other thing, it's never been tested. That is not business continuity. So that's why I've called it disaster avoidance and cyber resilience. Business continuity is about making your company more resilient to the things that can go wrong. You can't ever avoid disaster. You can't predict when these things are going to happen. But you can put measures in place to try and reduce the risk. And if you've got a decent plan in place, you can prevent disaster. So, ISO 22301, that's business continuity, and that's what it says. It's the capability to deliver products and services to an acceptable predefined level. It's not about getting your entire business up and running. It's about working out what are the bits of the business that keep you in existence. It might be you've got a staff of 200, but you only need 20 to make the money to keep the business going. That's the part of the business that you bring online first. That's the part of the business that you protect. Again, it's another framework. And it's about making you forward thinking. It's about having that ability to absorb things like that going wrong. Now it's a framework, so it fits with everything else. What I do is when I go into a client, I will implement both an information security management system and business continuity at the same time. The reason being is there's no point in protecting your crown jewels if your server then blows up. You're still out of business. But how do we do it? Well, and this is another reason why, if you've already got an information security management system in place also, you've done an awful lot of the work for this. You have to perform a risk assessment. Again, everything is risk-based. We also perform a business impact analysis. You don't get this from this 2-page sticky box pro forma thing that you've got in the back of your offices. This is having a look at your business and all your business units and working out what the supply chain is up and down, and working out which bits of those business make you the money and which bits of those business you need to protect. Measurable losses and subjective losses. Measurable, these are primarily financial. And it is your system downtime. It's the overtime that you're going to have to pay your IT staff to get you back up and running. It's the loss of business. It's maybe calling in somebody like me. These are all things that you have to sort out. That is the impact. It's about the island. Bad news spreads fast, yeah, especially on the island. Negative publicity. It's the damage to your reputation, your brand, and staff morale when they're not coming into work because they're not part of that defined business unit. It talks about people to death, and it includes every one of the people in your organisation, from the very top down. It's about knowing what's going on your systems. You've all had people leave in the last month. What information did they take with them? And that's it.
First of all, very good presentation. Enjoyed it. Thank you very much. Very useful. My name is Richard from Ferro Boats. We buy and sell boats for other people. So we deal with large amounts of other people's money. I don't have any myself, it's all other people. What puts a business in the front line to be a target?
It's that big businesses now are getting more and more secure. They've got the money to throw at security systems and any sort of security system you like. So what's happening now is that the threat is changing and it's moving down the chain to SMEs. It's the old adage, you know, you've got two guys running through a jungle away from a tiger. One guy says to the other, I hope we can outrun this tiger. The other guy says, no, I just hope I can outrun you. Yeah? Criminals will go for the low-hanging fruit because it's easiest. It's like Mark said, if you have a burglar alarm and a box installed on your house, they're not going to pick on your house. They're going to go to the next one that hasn't. Yeah? So that's what's happening. That's what the risk is.
Thanks very much for the excellent presentations this morning. My name's Andy Stone, Cordell Solutions. We're a security systems integration consultancy. We touched on this morning about electronic security protection buildings. We touched on network port attacks. We talked about backup of servers. But one of the big important things that we see with clients is actually about the physical protection and access control of server rooms. Because quite often you can have holistic security around a building, but your vulnerable points, which are your server rooms, are completely unprotected. They have no access control, they don't have any physical protection. What's the panel's view on that?
What tends to happen is many businesses may secure the outside of the perimeter, but then inside everybody's trusted. And the server room is left open, or the server room door is closed but unlocked, or even just locked with a key, but there's no audit trail, there's no control over who has access to that room. So certainly we would endorse the access control element of it, because access control.
Looking at the subject,
Sorry.
the encryption, we spoke a lot about encrypting of laptops and devices that you take away, but the same sort of things can apply to things in a server environment. If you've got servers in a data center, there are methods to encrypt that data to protect against those physical servers being stolen, those hard drives coming from the machine, and the criminals getting access to data that way. So it's, again, all part of this, how you manage lots of different areas to protect yourself, your frontline firewalls, but also maybe looking at encryption on a server level, potentially, something some people look at.
Yeah, hello everyone, I'm Tony Cape, I'm a business manager from Barclays, and I'm reliably informed our data is secure, so I'm here picking up information for clients' benefit. Cyber essentials recognition and the kite mark system, how useful is that going to be moving forward, and is it a real sign of that companies taking their cyber crime prevention seriously?
Okay, well, Cyber Essentials is a government-mandated scheme. If you want to operate with government now, what they're basically saying is you must be Cyber Essentials certified, and you end up with this nice little badge on your website. Essentially, it's what they say is if you implement Cyber Essentials, then you shut yourself down to 80% of all the risks, external risks of virus attacks and so on and so forth. It's well worth doing. And what it does do is it gives you a really good baseline to protect your company from external attack. So we're not talking about employees or anything like that. It's quite technology focused, but it's about having firewalls that are properly updated. It's about doing your patching. It's about having a proper password policy. If you implement all those things for Cyber Essentials, you make yourself a harder target.